Hey guys, it's Fidan. Today we're going to be making Vancho Cake. Vancho Cake is simply vanilla and chocolate cake. So you're going to alternate the cake layers like vanilla, chocolate, and it's going to go like that. You're going to cover it with some frosting, and then I'm also going to show you how to make a white chocolate ganache. So this ganache is going to go on top of the cake, which will make it extra good, and then you can do your desired decorations. It's really simple to make and it's super delicious. So let's get on to making this Vancho cake. First, let's start by making the chocolate cake base. For that, let's assemble the dry ingredients. So into a bowl, set a sift and add 1 cup of all-purpose flour, 1/4 cup plus 2 tablespoons of cocoa powder, 3/4 teaspoon of baking powder, half a teaspoon of baking soda, and half a teaspoon of salt. Sift all of these ingredients well. Next into it, let's add half a cup of brown sugar. If you don't have brown sugar, you can simply go ahead and use half a cup of white granulated sugar itself. It's just optional to use brown sugar. Then we're going to add in half a cup of sugar. So you can totally add in 1 cup of white granulated sugar instead of the brown sugar also. You want to whisk it until it's well combined, and you want to break those large lumps of the brown sugar. Then whisk well and set it aside. Let's get on to assembling the wet ingredients. For that, take a bowl or a cup and add in 1 egg. Also add in half a teaspoon of coffee mixed with half a teaspoon of water. Then let's add a teaspoon of vanilla extract. Whisk those until well combined. And into it, let's add 1/3 cup of oil. Make sure you use vegetable oil. Whisk that again until well combined, and add in half a cup of buttermilk. The buttermilk will give a better texture to the cake and it will make the cake more tastier. Whisk that well and let's set it aside. Next, I've brought back the dry ingredients. Slowly pour a little bit of the wet ingredients into the dry ingredients and then whisk it. Once you've added in all that wet ingredients, you have to whisk it until well combined and the batter should get really smooth. Now the batter is nice and smooth. The batter is ready, and this should be the consistency of the batter. It should be a little bit dribbly and drippy. So let's set it aside and bring in our pans for baking. So here I've took a baking pan. I've lined it with some parchment paper. Let's pour in this chocolate cake batter. I'm using a 9-inch pan. You can use any pan that you have at home. So now I've poured in the batter. Let's set this in a preheated oven for baking. And you want to bake it until a skewer inserted comes out clean. The chocolate cake is baking. Meanwhile, let's get on to making the vanilla cake. So let's assemble the dry ingredients. Into a bowl, set a sift and add 1 cup plus 2 tablespoons of all-purpose flour, 2 tablespoons of cornflour, 1 1/4 teaspoon of baking powder, half a teaspoon of baking soda, and half a teaspoon of salt. Sift those ingredients well and whisk it until well combined. Next, let's set it aside. Next, we have to assemble the wet ingredients. So into a bowl or a cup, add 2 large eggs. Also add in 2 teaspoons of vanilla extract. Once that's whisked well, let's add in 3/4 cup of sugar. Gradually add the sugar and whisk it until the sugar dissolves in really well. You don't want a really lumpy mixture. You want the sugar to dissolve in really well. So keep whisking it for until 5 minutes, until the color lightens a little bit. Then into it, let's add half a cup of oil. Again, make sure you use vegetable oil. Whisk that until well combined. And add in half a cup of buttermilk. Again, when you use buttermilk, it's going to give a better texture and a really good taste to the cake. Whisk it until well combined. And let's set it aside. Next, bring back the dry ingredients and slowly pour the wet ingredients into the dry mixture. Pour in the wet ingredients gradually and keep mixing. You don't want any lumps. Mix it thoroughly until it becomes nicely smooth. So the batter is nice and smooth and it's all ready now. It should be in a nice and ribbony consistency. So let's move on to baking it. Here I have a baking pan lined with a piece of parchment paper. Then pour in the cake batter and let's keep it in a preheated oven for baking until a skewer inserted in comes out clean. Now I have both the cakes ready. I've cut my vanilla cake into 2 layers and the chocolate cake remains the same. I'm not cutting it into 2 layers. I've leveled the top of both the cakes and then cut the vanilla cake into 2 layers. I'm not cutting the chocolate cake into 2 layers. So keep a small amount of frosting on your turntable. Keep your first layer of the cake, that should be the vanilla cake. Brush on some sugar syrup. It's really necessary to brush sugar syrup or else the cake won't be soft. Then add a nice dollop of frosting. And spread it towards the side and even out the frosting really well. Then keep the second layer of your cake, that should be the chocolate cake. Again brush on some sugar syrup to make the cake super soft. Keep another dollop of frosting, of the chocolate frosting. I'm using whipped cream frosting. If you want to use the same frosting, I'll leave a link in the description down below to it. Then keep your third layer of the cake, that should be the vanilla cake. Then you want to crumb coat the cake with some vanilla frosting. I'm using normal whipped cream frosting, which I'll leave a link in the description down below. And it's really necessary to crumb coat this cake because the chocolate frosting in between of the layers will come out. And you also want to seal all the crumbs when you're doing this crumb coat so that in the final coat none of the crumbs and the chocolate frosting comes up. Very necessary to smooth down the sides. And once you've crumb coated the cake, you need to refrigerate it for around 2 hours. And then you can start frosting it. So I've already refrigerated it. Be very gentle and careful so that the chocolate frosting and none of the crumbs comes up. And it's fine if there are a little bit of crumbs because we're going to cover it. with the chocolate ganache, the white chocolate ganache, and it's gonna be perfect. Once you've frosted it perfectly, you again need to keep this in the refrigerator, and it's fine if a little bit of those crumbs are popping out, and it's totally fine because we're gonna cover it with the ganache. The white chocolate ganache is gonna cover all these seams and hide everything. So you need to keep this in the refrigerator before pouring the ganache. My cake is getting ready in the refrigerator, so meanwhile let's make the ganache. For that, right here I have some fresh cream. I've took 100 grams of fresh cream, and I'm gonna keep this in the microwave and heat it until it's nicely hot, but you don't want the cream to boil. If you want, you can do it in a pan also. You can just heat up the cream and it's gonna be fine, but make sure you don't boil the cream at all. Now I kept my cream in the microwave. I've also added 2 tablespoons of butter into it. Then here I have some chocolate. This is white chocolate. You can use any sort of white chocolate that you like, and I've grated it into smaller chunks so that when we pour the cream and it gets exposed with the cream's heat. So pour in all of that cream, and then you just slowly want to mix that. Get it in with everywhere. Now at this point it's really chunky, but as the cream is still hot, it'll stay in the heat and it'll get melted automatically. So you want to let it rest for 1 minute, just like that. And after 1 minute, the heat of the cream will melt the chocolate, and you just want to whisk so it's done. Then here I've set a piece of parchment paper below. Then I've kept my cake on top of a plate, and now it's totally frozen and it's nicely set, and we're gonna pour on top the ganache. You really want to pour the ganache right when it is hot itself. You don't want the ganache to cool down, and if it cools down, the chocolate will get thickened, and when the chocolate gets thickened, it won't properly drip. It will just guide down the frosting and take everything out. So you want the ganache to be still hot. Once you've poured it and covered the full cake in the ganache, you can start decorating it the way you like. I just have some chocolate melted in, and I've put it in a piping bag. I'm just gonna draw small lines, and using a skewer, I'm just gonna go around and make a nice design. You can decorate the cake however you want. It's your wish. I'm first going in one line and then again going in the opposite direction. This will make a nice gradient and a design. I'm again just gonna go crazy with that chocolate and doing a bit more of decoration. I'm just gonna put a few dots and go the opposite direction too. And once you've done with your decoration, you have to keep this in the refrigerator completely for at least 5 hours. And I've kept it in the refrigerator. I took it out. Now it's completely frozen. The chocolate has got in and it's set. So now you can decorate it more if you want. I'm just having some chocolate decorations right here. Decorate your cake in the way that you like, because it's your cake. And that's it. That's how we made the Vancho cake. Now let's cut into this cake. While cutting itself, you can understand how soft the cake is, and it's really delicious. with the chocolate and the vanilla frosting and a perfect ganache to go on top. It looks incredible and it tastes incredible too. So you can see all the layers, the vanilla, chocolate, and again the vanilla, and then the ganache. Thank you so much for watching. Hope you liked it. And if you did, please don't forget to give me a big thumbs up down below. And if you want to see this video in Malayalam, I'll leave a link in the description down below, so you can go check out that. Thank you so much for watching once again, and bye-bye.